I remember the day Lily was born like it was yesterday. I was 8, a skinny girl with wide eyes and a head full of dreams. My parents, John and Sarah, were ordinary folks. Dad worked at a local factory, and Mom stayed at home. Life was simple until Lily came along. "Look at her, Sarah. She's got your eyes," Dad had cooed, holding Lily for the first time. Mom had smiled, a tired but triumphant smile. "And your nose, John." I stood by the door, clutching my ragged doll, waiting for someone to notice me. "Can I see Lily?" I asked timidly. Mom glanced at me, her eyes barely registering my presence. "Not now, Linda. Lily needs rest, and so do I." School wasn't much better. Kids can be cruel when they smell vulnerability. "Hey, Scarecrow Linda," Jack, the class bully, would sneer as he tugged at my faded dress. "Did you get your clothes from the trash?" I tried to ignore them, but words hurt more than punches. At home, Lily grew into a pampered princess. She'd scribble in my textbooks and giggle. "Look, Linda, I'm helping you with homework." I'd sigh. "Lily, please don't do that. I need those for school." One day, she went too far, pouring paint over my only good dress. I yelled at her, but she just cried. That's when Mom stormed in. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her eyes flashing. "Lily ruined my dress," I said, holding up the stained fabric. Mom didn't even look at the dress. "How dare you yell at your sister? Go to your room, Linda. No dessert for a week." Grandma was the only one who understood. "Don't let them get you down, Linda," she'd say. Her house was my refuge, filled with books and love. She taught me to escape into stories, to live 1,000 lives within those worn pages. The day Grandma passed away was the day I lost my true home. I remember coming back from school, my heart heavy, walking into a house filled with her absence. My parents were in the living room, already talking about her belongings. "We should start clearing out her stuff," Dad said, his voice devoid of any sadness. Mom was looking through a list. "And her library? Those dusty old books?" I lingered at the doorway, listening, a tightness growing in my chest. "Just get rid of them," Dad shrugged. "Who needs all that old paper?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "Can I have Grandma's books?" I blurted out, stepping into the room. "Please?" They both turned, almost surprised to see me. "Sure, take them," Mom said dismissively. "We don't have any use for them anyway." I spent the next days transferring Grandma's books to my room, each one a piece of her I wasn't ready to lose. Life moved on in its cruel pace. As high school came to an end, my parents made an offer I didn't expect. "We'll pay for your college," Mom announced one evening. "You can study accounting or something practical." I remember feeling a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Really? Why?" I asked. "It's our duty," Dad said. "Just don't expect any more handouts after this." College was my escape, a chance to be more than just the overlooked sister. But even that came with its price. A few weeks into my part-time job at the library, Mom cornered me. "You're making money now. It's only fair you start paying us back for your tuition." I was stunned. "But you said you'd pay for my college." "I didn't ask for this." "Don't be ungrateful," she snapped. "Half your salary, that's the deal." The injustice of it burned in me, but I had no choice. Half of what little I earned went straight into their pockets. Years passed in this exhausting cycle: work, study, pay my unfair dues. My graduation was supposed to be a celebration, but it felt more like a reminder of the shackles I couldn't escape. At the dinner table, with Lily smirking beside me, my parents dropped another bombshell. "Now that you're working full-time, we expect you to continue paying us," Dad said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "What?" I was incredulous. "But I've been paying you all through college." When does this end? It ends when we say it does, Mom said coldly. You owe us, Linda. I felt a mixture of anger and helplessness. This isn't fair, I protested. Life isn't fair, Dad retorted. You live under our roof. You follow our rules. And just like that, my dreams of independence, of a life where I could be my own person, were crushed under the weight of their greed and entitlement. In my room that night, surrounded by Grandma's books, I realized the stark contrast between the warmth and love they represented and the cold, calculating nature of my own family. These books were my only legacy, the only thing that connected me to a sense of belonging, of being understood. Life after college became a monotonous cycle of work and fatigue. Every payday, the same scene would unfold at home. Linda, have you got your paycheck yet? Mom would ask, her hand already outstretched, the moment I stepped through the door. I'd hand over half of my earnings without a word. It had become a routine, a bitter pill I swallowed each month. One evening, I mustered the courage to confront them. Mom, Dad, I've been thinking, I began hesitantly. Maybe I can start keeping a bit more of my salary. I need to save up, maybe for a place of my own. Mom's expression hardened. Your own place? Don't be ridiculous. You owe us, Linda. We paid for your education. But I've been paying back. Isn't that enough? I protested, feeling a surge of frustration. Enough? You think a few $1,000s cover your debt to us? Dad's voice rose. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. You owe us for a lifetime. I felt my heart sink. But I never asked for any of this. I just wanted to go to college. And who do you think paid for that? You think that was free? Mom snapped. No, Linda, you'll continue paying us, just as you have been. The unfairness of it all was suffocating. I had hoped, foolishly, that they might see reason, but their entitlement knew no bounds. Lily, ever the favored child, never missed a chance to taunt me. Look at our little accountant, can't even afford a new dress, she'd sneer, flaunting the latest gadget or outfit they'd bought her. I remember one particularly hard day at work. I had stayed late, trying to finish a complex report. Exhausted, I reached home to find my family had ordered takeout, my favorite Thai food. For a moment, my spirits lifted. Is there any left for me? I asked, hopeful. Mom shrugged. You should have been here earlier. Besides, you can buy your own food with your big salary. I retreated to my room, too tired to argue. Dinner that night was a stale sandwich and a cup of tea. Alone in my room, surrounded by the comforting presence of my grandmother's books, I felt the full weight of the life I was trapped in. I longed for more, for freedom, for a chance to live for myself. But every attempt to break free was met with guilt trips and reminders of a debt that I was beginning to realize might not even be mine. My life at home had become a ceaseless routine of work and servitude. Each day, I'd return from my job as an accountant, mentally drained, only to be greeted by the chaos of my family's demands. One evening, I came home to find the living room in a mess. Dad was lounging on the sofa, watching TV, while Lily was sprawled on the floor, surrounded by a pile of clothes. Linda, you're back. Finally, Dad said without looking away from the screen. Clean up this mess, will you? And start dinner. We're hungry. But I've just got back from work, I protested weakly, my shoulders slumping. Work? You call sitting in an office all day work? Lily scoffed, not bothering to lift her gaze from her phone. Try doing something useful for a change. Their words stung, but I was too tired to argue. Silently, I began picking up the clothes, my mind heavy with resentment. As I cooked dinner, the familiar sense of injustice gnawed at me. I was more than just their housekeeper, more than their source of income. But in their eyes, I was nothing more than an extension of their will, a means to an end. The next morning, I was met with another list of demands. Linda, take Lily shopping today. She needs new clothes, Mom instructed as I was about to leave for work. But I have a busy day at the office, I said, my voice strained with frustration. Oh, what's more important? Your job or your family? Mom retorted, her tone sharp. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. My job was important only when it benefited them. Reluctantly, I agreed to take Lily shopping after work, sacrificing the little personal time I had left. At the mall, Lily flitted from store to store, her excitement in stark contrast to my growing despair. Isn't this dress cute, Linda? She gushed, holding up an expensive designer dress. Buy it for me. You owe us, after all. I looked at the price tag and felt a pang in my chest. Lily, this is too much. I can't afford this. Can't afford it? But you're the big earner in the family, she taunted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Stop being so stingy. I bought the dress, my heart heavy with the knowledge that this was just another link in the chain that bound me to them. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that my life had become a cycle of giving my time, my money, my energy, with nothing in return. I was trapped in a life of servitude, catering to the whims of a family that saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. The day of my 30th birthday dawned just like any other day. I woke up early, hoping maybe, just maybe, this day would be different. That my family would remember and we'd have a small celebration, a moment of happiness. I walked into the kitchen where Mom, Dad, and Lily were already having breakfast. Good morning, I said softly. Dad glanced up. Morning. Make sure you're not late for work. I waited, hoping for more, but there was just silence. My heart sank. They had forgotten. It was just another day for them. I tried to hide my disappointment as I prepared my breakfast. The clock ticked away, each second a reminder of how little they cared. As I was about to leave for work, I mustered up the courage to remind them. You know, today is my birthday, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mom looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before it vanished. Oh, is it? Well, happy birthday. Don't expect us to throw a party. Lily snickered. Yeah, happy birthday, Linda. Maybe you can treat yourself to something nice with your big paycheck. Their words stung like 1,000 needles. I left the house, holding back tears, feeling more alone than ever. The day at work was long and tiring. When I returned home, I hoped maybe they'd have a change of heart. But the house was just as I'd left it. I found Mom, Dad, and Lily in the living room, ordering food from a fancy restaurant over the phone. My hopes dissipated like mist. Are we expecting guests? I asked, a glimmer of hope reigniting. No, just felt like ordering something nice, Mom said casually. You can join us if you want. I watched as they ordered dish after dish, my heart sinking with each click of the phone. Should I get the lobster or the steak? Lily mused aloud. You should get both, Mom encouraged. I stood there, a bystander in my own home. They hadn't just forgotten my birthday, they didn't care. I retreated to my room, the walls echoing with their laughter and chatter. I sat on my bed, surrounded by Grandma's books, the only gifts I'd ever truly treasured. In the silence of my room, I called my Aunt Mary, the only other person who had ever shown me kindness. She answered with a warm, "Happy birthday, Linda. How are you, dear?" Her words, so simple yet so full of warmth, brought tears to my eyes. We talked for a while, and she shared stories about Grandma, bringing a smile to my face. Then she said something that stopped me cold. You know, your grandmother would be so proud of you. She always wanted the best for you. That's why she left the money for your education. I was confused. What money, Aunt Mary? The money she saved up for your college. Didn't your parents tell you? She was so determined to give you a good start in life. My world spun. Grandma had paid for my college? All these years, my parents had lied, making me believe I owed them. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. The truth was a key, unlocking the chains I'd been bound with for so long. My parents had manipulated me, used me, all based on a lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. The revelation churned in my mind, a mix of anger, betrayal, and a newfound sense of determination. I couldn't let them control me anymore. I had to break free, to find my own path. The next morning, I confronted them. I know about the money Grandma left for my education. Why did you lie to me? Their reactions were a mix of shock and defensiveness. We did what we had to do, Mom said coldly. We're your parents. It's your duty to support us. Duty? You lied and made me your servant. I exclaimed, my voice trembling with emotion. Dad just rolled her eyes. Drama queen. You should be grateful we let you live here. That was the final straw. I was done being their scapegoat, their cash cow. It was time for me to take control of my life. The morning after my birthday was a new beginning. The sun seemed brighter, the air fresher, as if the world was acknowledging my resolve. I had packed my things quietly, trying to avoid any early confrontations. But as I was about to leave, Mom and Lily confronted me in the hallway, blocking my path. Where do you think you're going with those bags? Mom asked, her eyes narrowing. I'm leaving, I stated, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. Mom's tone turned pleading. Linda, you can't do this to us. We're your family. Where will you go? Anywhere but here, I said, stepping around them. I deserve better than this. I deserve a life. As I walked out the door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The shackles of guilt and obligation that had held me down for so long were finally broken. I didn't look back. I walked towards the bus stop, my heart filled with a mix of fear and excitement. I was stepping into the unknown, but for the first time, it was a path that I had chosen for myself. On the bus, I called a number I had written down a few months back, an advertisement for an apartment rental. The voice on the other end was friendly and understanding. By the time the bus reached my stop, I had arranged to view the apartment later that day. The apartment was small, but cozy, a stark contrast to the coldness of my family home. As I signed the lease, I felt a sense of ownership and independence I had never experienced before. That night, in my new apartment, surrounded by my grandmother's books, I finally felt at peace. I cooked a simple dinner for myself, enjoying every bite without the weight of judgment or expectation. My phone rang several times that evening, the caller ID showing my family's number. But I didn't answer. I was done letting them control my life. Instead, I curled up on the small sofa with a book, losing myself in a story of adventure and courage. It was like Grandma was there with me, her spirit encouraging me to live the life I was meant to have. In the quiet of my apartment, I made a promise to myself. I would live my life on my own terms, find my own happiness. I would no longer be the overlooked child, but a woman strong, free, and in control of her destiny. Settling into my new apartment was like starting a fresh chapter in my life. I had my own space, and for the first time, I could use my salary for myself. It was a revelation to realize how far my earnings could stretch when I wasn't giving half of it away to my parents and sister. I could afford good food, stylish clothes, and even indulge in a bit of self-care. One of my first acts of independence was giving myself a complete makeover. I got a stylish haircut, something I had always wanted but never dared to do. I bought clothes that made me feel confident and happy. Every morning, I dressed for work with a sense of pride and excitement. At work, my colleagues noticed the change immediately. Linda, you look fantastic. What's your secret? Sarah, one of my closest colleagues, asked me one day. Just enjoying my life and embracing the change, I replied with a smile, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But the most important thing I did after moving out was to take my grandmother's books with me. Those books were more than just literature, they were a connection to the happiest part of my childhood and a reminder of my grandmother's love. Every evening, after returning from work, I would make myself a cup of tea and curl up with a book from Grandma's collection. It was my way of keeping her memory alive and cherishing the love for reading she had instilled in me. Life in my new apartment was peaceful and fulfilling. I relished in the small joys, like cooking my favorite meals, decorating my space, and losing myself in a good book. The sense of freedom was exhilarating. One afternoon, as I was arranging my books on a new shelf, I came across an old photo of my grandmother tucked inside a novel. Tears welled up in my eyes as I held it. I knew she would have been proud of me for finding my own way. I placed the photo on my nightstand, a nightly reminder of where I came from and the strength I carried within me. My grandmother's enduring love and the lessons she taught me were my guiding light. As days turned into weeks, I found myself evolving. I was no longer the overlooked, burdened daughter and sister. I was Linda, an independent woman who had taken control of her life. I had a job that I enjoyed, a cozy home filled with memories, and the freedom to be myself. Life was no longer about surviving, it was about living, thriving, and finding joy in the little things. My transformation was not just external, it was a deep, internal change that had reshaped my view of the world and myself. Every morning, as I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a confident, happy woman staring back at me. I was finally at peace, living a life that was truly my own. I had been living in my new apartment for a month when my phone rang one evening. The caller ID flashed my parents' number, a sight that now stirred a mix of emotions. Bracing myself, I answered. "Linda, this is ridiculous. You need to come back home. We can't manage without the money you were giving us." Mom's voice was both pleading and demanding. "I'm sorry you're finding things tough, but I've moved on. Maybe it's time you both looked for jobs," I suggested, trying to keep my voice calm. "How dare you talk to us like that? After all we've done for you?" My dad's voice boomed through the speaker. "I've done my part for years. It's time for you to take responsibility for your own lives," I replied firmly. Their response was a barrage of insults and accusations, but I held my ground. "I'm not responsible for your financial problems," I repeated before ending the call. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Opening it, I found my sister Lily standing there, her expression one of expectancy. "Linda, I need money for a new gadget. Just transfer it to me like before," she said, as if nothing had changed. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "Lily, I'm not your personal bank anymore. You should try earning your own money." Her reaction was immediate and intense. She began screaming at me, hurling insults and accusations. "You owe us. You're just a selfish, heartless monster." Her screams were so loud that they attracted the attention of my neighbors. Concerned, one of them called the police. Soon, 2 officers were at my door, questioning us about the commotion. After explaining the situation, the officers escorted Lily out, who continued her tirade even as she was led away. I blocked my family's numbers on my phone after that. I was done being their scapegoat and ATM. The next few weeks brought whispers of my family's worsening situation. Mutual acquaintances shared stories of their mounting debts and desperate attempts to find money. My parents, who had never worked a day since I started earning, were now doing odd jobs. Lily, too, found herself in a situation she had never imagined. The sister who once mocked me for my old clothes was now selling her designer outfits and expensive gadgets just to make ends meet. Despite a fleeting sense of pity, I reminded myself of their years of neglect and exploitation. They had chosen this path, and it was their responsibility to navigate it. In my world, life was blossoming. My job was going well, and I was enjoying my newfound freedom and independence. My apartment, once a distant dream, was now my haven of peace, filled with memories of my grandmother and her books. One evening, as I sat in my reading nook, a sense of profound contentment washed over me. The once overlooked and undervalued daughter had transformed into an independent woman. I had broken free from the chains of familial manipulation and emerged stronger.
"Welcome to the family." Adrienne's voice dripped with saccharine sweetness as she handed me a perfectly wrapped gift basket. The smug satisfaction in her eyes betrayed the innocent facade as our gazes met. I managed a polite smile as I accepted the elaborately arranged basket, concealing my unease. Adrienne had made it abundantly clear from the moment I met her that I didn't truly belong in her family's elite social circle. Her chilly disdain was expertly veiled by fake hospitality, but I recognized the game, one she'd perfected over years of keeping up appearances. "Thank you, Adrienne. It's beautiful," I replied, fighting the urge to tear open the gift immediately and expose whatever passive-aggressive jab lay within. My husband Ethan beamed with oblivious pride at my side, squeezing my hand affectionately. He remained blissfully unaware of the tension simmering between his wife and sister. As the baby shower celebrations continued, Adrienne's plastic smile never wavered as she drifted between guests, the picture of graciousness. Yet when our eyes met again across the room, her gaze pierced me like sharpened daggers. Adrienne's unspoken message screamed loud and clear. This was her turf, and I would never be more than an intruder. Steeling myself, I clutched Ethan's hand tighter as we mingled among his family and their well-heeled friends. I kept the gift basket tucked securely in my arms, dreading the carefully selected insult surely wrapped within. Hours later, after the last guest had filtered out, I retreated to the bedroom and pulled off the ribbons with trembling hands. Inside the basket lay an assortment of high-end bath products and a plush terrycloth robe, all blindingly white. At the very bottom, nestled like a viper among roses, was a single sealed envelope with neat cursive script, "Mara's fresh start." My heart plummeted as realization washed over me. Adrienne knew my deepest secret, the painful past I'd fought to put behind me. A past Ethan loved me enough to accept, but one his privileged family would never understand. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope to reveal a check for $10,000 and a brief note, "For when you're ready to walk away and spare us the embarrassment." The message was clear. Adrienne's twisted generosity bought my silence and compliance or ensured my banishment. My mouth went dry as I crumpled the note, panic and rage clashing within me. The game had begun, but this time, I vowed to write my own rules. In the weeks following the baby shower, Adrienne's malicious games intensified. No longer content with subtle digs, she launched an all-out offensive to drive a wedge between Ethan and me. "Mara, darling," she trilled one afternoon, sweeping into the living room uninvited. "I simply had to stop by with this precious outfit for little Emma." She thrust an over-the-top frilly dress into my hands, the lace and bows dripping with saccharine excess. "It's lovely," I managed, forcing a smile. "But really, you shouldn't have." "Nonsense." Adrienne batted her eyes innocently. "Every little princess needs an outrageously impractical gown that she'll hate in a few years." My grip tightened on the offending garment as I bit back a scathing retort. Ethan remained oblivious, offering his sister an indulgent grin. "You spoil her, Addie. What would we do without you?" The words struck like a dagger, highlighting my exclusion from their privileged inner circle. Adrienne's syrupy laugh grated my nerves. "I'm simply providing the essentials that Mara's background seems to be lacking," she purred, inspecting her freshly manicured nails. The thinly veiled insult hung in the air. Before I could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed, and he excused himself, utterly missing the subtext of our exchange. Adrienne pounced the moment he left the room. "Let's be honest, Mara, you'll never fit in here, no matter how hard you try to play the part." Her smile morphed into a condescending sneer. "My family deserves better than a child of your circumstances." White-hot anger lanced through me, but I refused to rise to her bait. Adrienne wanted me doubting myself, slipping back into old insecurities. Well, two could play at keeping up appearances. Mustering my sweetest smile, I rose to face her squarely. "Thank you for the dress, Adrienne. How considerate of you to think of us." I watched with satisfaction as her brow creased ever so slightly, caught off guard by my sugary politeness. Over the following months, I matched Adrian's passive aggression with sickly sweet gratitude at every turn. Compliments dripping with venom were met with humble acceptance, driving her to escalating levels of pettiness. "I picked up this lovely wood varnish for you," she announced one day, thrusting a can of harsh chemicals into my hands. "Wouldn't want those habits from your past resurfacing." I simply smiled and thanked her for her thoughtfulness. With each exchange, I could see the confusion and frustration mounting behind Adrian's meticulously crafted mask. Her twisted games held no power over me anymore. For now, I'd play the role of adoring sister-in-law, but soon enough I'd shatter Adrian's fragile facade and display her true ugliness for all to see. The reckoning was coming. I would be sure of it. The first prickles of doubt crept in a few weeks later when an anonymous package arrived at our doorstep. Adrian's carefully orchestrated plans were escalating. "What is this?" Ethan frowned, extracting a sealed manila envelope from the plain brown packaging. "I'm not sure." I trailed off as he tore it open. Inside was a glossy photograph of me exiting a dilapidated building, head bowed against the camera's flash. The place was all too familiar, a sobriety clinic I'd attended years ago after hitting my lowest point. "Mara?" Ethan's voice was laced with a mix of concern and confusion. "What's going on?" I felt the blood drain from my face as my gaze flickered to the plain logo embossed on the envelope, "A friend who cares." Of course, only Adrian could concoct such a melodramatic, underhanded scheme. "It's from my past, before I got my life together." I swallowed hard, struggling to contain my rage. "An old haunt that's better left behind." Ethan slipped an arm around me, his brow furrowed. "Why would someone send this? Trying to dredge up ancient history?" "You'd have to ask your dear sister about that." The words slipped out in a clipped tone before I could stop them. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "Adrienne, why would you accuse her of something so horrible?" "Use your eyes, Ethan." I shoved the damning photograph into his hands. "Who else would go to such depths to try driving me away?" His jaw tensed, but he said nothing. The flicker of doubt in his eyes spoke volumes. In the days after, a heavy pall hung over our home. Ethan avoided the subject, but I could see the wariness in his movements, the questioning glances when he thought I wouldn't notice. Adrienne had planted her seeds of deception, and they were taking root. The breaking point came when I returned home from running errands to find Adrienne's car in the driveway. I braced myself for another round of her twisted mind games. "There you are!" She bounced out of the front door, all sugary smiles, Ethan trailing behind with a distracted air. "I've been simply dying to catch up." Before I could formulate a response, she looped her arm through mine and steered me towards the kitchen. "Ethan told me about that dreadful photograph," she stage-whispered with a grimace. "I can't imagine who would stoop to such lows." The sickly sweet concern in her voice was a razor's edge against my nerves. "Yes, how unfortunate," I responded flatly, pulling my arm from her grasp. "I'll be sure to thank them for reopening old wounds." Adrian's eyes widened in exaggerated hurt. "Why, Mara? I'd never dream of inflicting such pain. You know I only want what's best for you and my beloved brother." Her saccharine tone twisted the knife deeper. "That's why I've reached out to a dear friend who specializes in personal makeovers, shall we say?" I opened my mouth to respond, but she barreled on with the air of one bestowing an act of supreme generosity. "Derek will be simply marvelous in helping you put the past where it belongs, behind you." Adrian smiled with smug satisfaction. "Won't that be transformative?" "That's quite enough, Addie." Ethan's sharp voice cut through her self-congratulations. "If Mara wants help, she'll let us know." My heart lurched to see him rallying to my defense. A flicker of uncertainty passed over Adrienne's face, but her mask quickly reset to one of sugary concern. "Of course, you're both right. I only want to ease this difficult transition." As she swept towards the door, she tossed one last poisoned barb over her shoulder. "After all, we are family now." The door clicked shut with sickening finality. This wasn't a game anymore, it was open warfare, and I had no choice but to fight with everything I had. In the aftermath of Adrienne's latest ploy, I found an unlikely ally in Samantha, one of Ethan's cousins. She sought me out a few days later with a somber expression. "Mara, I need to talk to you about Adrienne." I braced myself, expecting another round of her manipulations. But Samantha surprised me. "I know what she's doing. The lying, the sabotage. Adrian put me through a similar hell a few years back. Her lips tightened into a hard line. I won't let her do that to anyone else in this family. The raw pain in Samantha's eyes stopped me cold. Suddenly, her past falling out with Adrian made sense. You've seen her true colors, too, I murmured, realization dawning. Samantha nodded jerkily. The fake smiles, the backhanded generosity, it's all a mind game to her. She can't stand seeing others happy if she's not the center of attention. Her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists as she recounted Adrian's torment when Samantha got engaged years ago. How the so-called sisterly advice slowly muddled into discreet jabs about Samantha's fiancé's shortcomings. Innocent innuendos that planted seeds of doubt until her relationship collapsed under the strain. By the time I realized what she was doing, it was too late. Samantha whispered, anguish lacing her voice. I lost everything that truly mattered to me because of her malice. White-hot anger lanced through me at the thought of Adrian's depravity, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the bigger picture. We can stop this, I stated with firm resolve, but we'll need to be smart and ready to fight fire with fire. A glimmer of hope kindled in Samantha's eyes. You have a plan? I nodded grimly. One that will blow Adrian's twisted game wide open. But it has to be perfectly executed, with no margin for error. Over the next few weeks, Samantha and I constructed an airtight counteroffensive. We documented every one of Adrian's thinly veiled jabs and assembled a compelling case to present to Ethan's parents. But that was just step one. The real masterstroke involved throwing an intimate family dinner, creating a perfectly staged scenario where Adrian's vicious true nature would detonate for all to see. No more masks, no more twisted kindnesses masking her malice. As the dinner date approached, I could sense Adrian's growing desperation in her transparent overtures of bonding over wedding china patterns and baby bronzing ideas. She knew something was afoot, but couldn't pinpoint the source of her unraveling control. The night before, Samantha and I made the final preparations, every potential stumbling block accounted for. Are you ready for this? She asked, eyes blazing with determination. Once we go through with it, there's no going back. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. It's time Adrian experienced the karma she's had coming for a long time. The next evening, the stage was set. With bright smiles and warm embraces, we welcomed Ethan's family into our home, playing the roles of genial hosts to perfection. Even Adrienne seemed to let her guard down fractionally as she breezed in, her trademark smugness in place. She knew how to work a crowd, a fact I was counting on. As the evening built towards its crescendo, I caught Samantha's eye across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Her grim smile and slight tilt of her glass was all the response I needed. Let the reckoning begin. As the dinner proceeded, the air thickened with tension. Samantha and I exchanged furtive glances, silently coordinating our every move. Adrienne, ever the mistress of performance, remained blindly oblivious to the trap being carefully laid. Mara, darling, you simply must tell me where you found this exquisite china pattern, she gushed, running a perfectly manicured nail along the rim of her plate. The details are just sublime. I suppressed an eye roll at her overwrought theatrics. Oh, just a little something I picked up, I replied with syrupy sweetness. I'm delighted you like it. Adrienne's smile stretched a touch too wide, giving her porcelain features a manic cast. Like it? I absolutely adore it. She turned to address the rest of the table, her voice carrying just an octave too high. Mara has such impeccable taste, don't you agree? A few murmurs of polite agreement rippled around the table. Ethan's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, no doubt registering the undercurrent of tension. I had her squirming now, just as we'd planned. Well, you know me, I demurred with a tinkling laugh. I simply can't resist finding little treasures in unexpected places. Adrienne's eyes narrowed infinitesimally at the seeming barb. Samantha caught my gaze and arched a challenging eyebrow. Game on. In fact, I continued in a louder tone, these plates held quite the checkered past before finding their way to me. Confused glances ricocheted around the table, but Adrienne remained laser-focused, the tightness around her eyes the only crack in her facade. You see, I pressed on relentlessly, they have a history of being rejected, cast aside by the very people who should have cherished them most. A muscle twitched in Adrienne's jaw, but she remained outwardly impassive. Touché. The barbs continued flying in both directions, each phrased with such exaggerated politeness that the others remained oblivious to the underlying battle being waged. Finally, in a stroke of feigned concern, Samantha interjected, "Adrienne, I do hope you're not coming down with something. You look quite flushed." The harried desperation was palpable in Adrienne's too bright smile now. "Whatever do you mean? I'm perfectly—" "Perhaps it's all this talk of treasures with complicated backgrounds," Samantha crooned with faux innocence. "It can be quite discomforting for those of us unaccustomed to such acquired tastes." In that moment, something inside Adrienne seemed to snap. Her lips peeled back in a rictus snarl as she rounded on me. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" she spat, the venom laid bare at last. "With your second-hand soul and—" The rushed self-editing was too late. Ethan's eyes went wide with shock, and a dismayed murmur reverberated around the table. Adrienne froze as if realizing too late the veil had slipped in spectacular fashion. Her gaze swiveled wildly around the stunned, accusing faces staring back at her. With a garbled cry, she shoved back from the table and fled the room, leaving only a ringing silence in her wake. Finally, at long last, the truth was laid bare. I caught Samantha's eye from across the table, and we shared an exhale of grim triumph. The time for judgment had come, and Adrienne was the one found sorely wanting. The silence that followed Adrienne's exit was deafening. All eyes turned towards me, a kaleidoscope of shock, accusation, and dawning realization etched across the faces of Ethan's family. I drew a fortifying breath, letting the weight of Adrienne's unmasking settle over us all. Ethan was the first to find his voice, his expression twisting with a potent mix of anger and disbelief. "Mara, what is going on? What was she talking about? Second-hand soul?" The hurt and confusion in his eyes lanced straight through me, but I refused to buckle under the burden of Adrienne's poison. "It's about my past," I stated, keeping my voice level. "The struggles I went through before finding my way to you." I sent him a pointed look, willing him to understand. Realization flickered across Ethan's features as the unspoken truth, the former addiction I'd confided in him years ago, blazed into the open. His mother paled, grasping the implication immediately. "Adrienne?" she breathed, horror tempering her voice. Surely she didn't. I fixed her with an unwavering stare. "She's been tormenting me for months, ever since she learned about my history." Looks like her mask finally slipped. A tense silence stretched out as the implications sank in. Ethan's father was the first to find his voice, an edge of steel framing his words. "Unacceptable. Completely unacceptable." His palm slammed against the table with a resonant thud. "We'll get to the bottom of this immediately." No sooner had the declaration left his lips than a tremulous Adrienne reappeared in the doorway, hastily dabbing at her perfectly made-up eyes with a lace handkerchief, the very picture of an aggrieved victim. I don't know what came over me," she stammered unconvincingly. "The stress of hosting, it all became too much." Despite her theatrical display, something profound had shifted. Her aura of superiority and entitlement was stripped away, leaving only a shrill, flailing desperation in its wake. "Save your hollow apologies, Adrienne," Ethan bit out, his normally affable demeanor replaced by frigid condemnation. "We know about your games, your cruelty towards Mara." Her bravado faltered momentarily, then the fight reignited in her eyes with bitter defiance. "You can't possibly think I'd stand idly by while you destroyed this family's standing by dragging in." Her lip curled with naked disdain. Her kind. A collective recoil spread around the room, but I held my ground, meeting her venomous stare with stoic resolution. There would be no redemption for the likes of Adrienne, not after this. That's enough. Ethan's father's voice cut through the tension like a knife, all traces of warmth extinguished. "You're clearly too far gone to be reasoned with right now." Adrienne opened her mouth, defiance blazing in her eyes, but her father raised a mollifying hand. "Don't say another word you can't take back, Adrienne. For now, you'll return to your apartment until you can rejoin society with a reality-based perspective." The ultimatum hung in the air like an executioner's blade. For a moment, it seemed Adrienne might rally one last poisonous counterattack. Then, just as swiftly, the fight drained from her body, leaving only a hollow, bitter husk. With a wordless hiss, she spun on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming mutely behind her. Silence reigned in the wake of her departure. I could practically sense the years of willful blindness being shed, the blinders falling away from those who'd enabled Adrienne's manipulations for far too long. Eventually, it was Ethan's mother who found her voice, weariness etching the lines around her eyes. "Mara, we owe you an apology, a profound one." She shook her head slowly. "We let this ugliness happen, let Adrienne run amok for reasons I can't begin to fathom." I opened my mouth to respond, but she pressed on with quiet resolution. "No more excuses. It's time we, as a family, faced the consequences of enabling a monster in our midst." Around the table, solemn nods met her words. At long last, the bitter truth was embraced. A single teardrop traced down my cheek as Ethan's arms enveloped me in a fierce, sheltering embrace. Justice and reckoning had both been served, in more ways than one. Most importantly, I'd been seen. And there was no going back now. In the days following Adrienne's explosive unmasking, a palpable shift gripped the family. The sisterly bond between her and Ethan, once ironclad, had been irreparably shattered. All that remained was a haunting void where unconditional loyalty once resided. "I can't believe the depth she stooped to," Ethan murmured, running a hand through his disheveled hair. We were seated in the living room, replaying the events in a numb daze. How could she be so cruel, so evil? I said nothing, simply wrapping my arms around him as he grappled with the harsh reality before us. Ethan's parents entered, their expressions ashen. "We've made arrangements for Adrienne," his mother began woodenly. "She'll be staying with your aunt upstate for the time being." Ethan tensed beside me, and I could sense his instinctive urge to protest, to find some thread of redemption to cling to. But his father's next words severed that futile hope. "It's not just us, son. Word is spreading about her behavior." He pinched the bridge of his nose, looking every bit his age. "The Ladies' Society has decided to disassociate from her, effective immediately." A chill lanced through me. The prestigious Ladies' Society wielded enormous social capital and influence. Being ousted was a death knell. "No," Ethan's anguished whisper said it all. He may have finally seen Adrienne's toxic truth, but having it blasted across high society was another devastating reckoning altogether. Over the next few weeks, the shunning rippled outward in a withering conflagration. Friends who'd once flocked to bask in Adrienne's archly curated aura now froze her out like a leper. Invitations ceased arriving, event attendance dried up, even the slightest interaction was scrutinized by those desperate to distance themselves from the pariah in our midst. The single-minded cruelty that had once been Adrienne's calling card was suddenly, viciously reflected back on her tenfold, and she had no one to blame but her own runaway malice. I finally crossed paths with her at the country club one sunny afternoon. She was a diminished shadow seated alone at a remote patio table, shoulders slumped in uncharacteristic defeat. As I approached, her eyes flicked up, and for a fleeting instant I saw the naked hurt and bewilderment laid bare, an ugly truth she could no longer deny. Then just as quickly, the shutters slammed down. Her lips twisted in a snarl of pure unbridled loathing. "Is this what you wanted? To take everything from me? To leave me with nothing?" The venom in her words struck like a physical blow, but this time I refused to recoil. "I didn't take anything, Adrienne," I replied, keeping my tone measured. "You brought this on yourself with your jealousy and hatred, this." I waved a hand at the empty, shunned tableau surrounding us. "This is just karma's shadow finally catching up." For a suspended moment, she seemed to teeter on the precipice of impotent rage and a dawning, horrified self-realization. Then her shoulders slumped, the fight visibly leaching out of her. "Just leave me be," she muttered, turning away in hollowed resignation. And with that, I did. Because the battle was long over, I'd emerged the decisive victor simply by embracing the resilience and perseverance Adrienne could never comprehend. In the end, her downfall hadn't required any malicious machinations, any shadowy revenge plots. Her increasingly frantic attempts to claw her way back into society's favor only cemented her disgrace further. Like a human supernova burning itself out, Adrienne's hatred had simply consumed her from within. I realized then that closure and vindication had been within me all along. All I'd needed was the strength to let karma run its implacable course. In the aftermath of Adrian's spectacular downfall, an unfamiliar sense of peace settled over our family. The constant undercurrent of tension, the minefields we'd all tiptoed through for far too long, had finally been diffused. Ethan in particular seemed to stand taller. The weight of his sister's toxicity finally lifted from his shoulders. Our relationship only grew stronger from the shared trauma we'd endured and overcome. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see the truth," he murmured one night as we readied for bed, his arms enveloping me in a tender embrace. "You tried to warn me, but I just couldn't accept how far Adrian had fallen." I pulled back and met his gaze steadily. "This wasn't your burden to carry alone, Ethan. That's what partnership means, facing the worst of storms together, not just the sunshine." Something shimmered in the depths of his eyes, profound gratitude laced with an abiding love. His kiss spoke volumes as our bodies intertwined in the gathering twilight. In the days and weeks ahead, the renewed bonds with Ethan's parents also blossomed in ways I'd never dared hope for. What had once been a tenuous, artificial connection slowly melted into genuine affection and acceptance. "We should have listened to you about Adrian from the start," his father admitted one evening over brandy and cigars. "But, well, you know the power of delusion regarding family." I nodded, understanding that all too keenly, but the hurt had faded, replaced by a world of possibility now that the wool had been ripped away. "No more deceptions," I stated, meeting his gaze levelly. "We start over from a place of honesty this time." His returning nod spoke volumes, and with it a weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. Even in the wider social circles that had once been Adrian's playground, our family's standing slowly rebounded. Where she had sown disgrace and alienation, we now reaped the rewards of solidarity and loyalty hard won. At a charity gala weeks later, I found myself pulled aside by the grand dame of the Ladies' Society, the same woman who had cast the irrevocable shunning of Adrian. "Mrs. Wells," she began with the barest hint of contrition tinging her gravelly voice, "I fear we may have misjudged you upon your arrival into our circle. Scurrilous rumors can be most misleading." She drew herself up, somehow managing to look down her nose at me despite her diminutive stature. "It's clear now that your poise and character were the targets of sabotage from, well, you know the source." Her lips compressed into a grim line. "Words may have been said that cannot be unsaid. Associations questioned that cannot be unbroken." I tensed imperceptibly, bracing for the inevitable slight that seemed destined to follow, but the dame's next words knocked me backward on my heels. "We would be honored if you would consider accompanying us for next month's retreat at the Hampton estate." My breath caught in my throat as I parsed the audacious overture. The Hampton retreat was the most elite, coveted social event of the season, a privilege solely for those ensconced at the upper echelons. To be invited, especially in the wake of the Adrian fallout, was tantamount to being embraced back into the innermost circle, whole and unquestioned. The message was clear. I'd survived the crucible, emerging untarnished while Adrian burned away to ash and infamy. Struggling to keep my features impassive, I inclined my head with studied grace. "The honor would be mine, Dame Elizabeth. I accept most humbly." As she bobbed her own regal acknowledgement, a warm sense of triumph bloomed in my chest. Not a retribution or conquest fueled by pettiness, but a hard-won victory over hatred and prejudice itself. This was the new foundation, wrought from adversity and perseverance. And as I turned to rejoin Ethan at my side, our fingers intertwining with unshakable solidarity, I knew our bond would be eternal. For in conquering our harshest demons from within, we'd forged an invincible bastion against whatever storms still awaited on the horizon.